Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and master certified life coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Hey there, welcome back to the podcast Women in the Middle. I'm your host, Susie Rosenstein, your master certified coach and midlife mentor, and I am so glad to be here with you again for this week's ENCORE episode, Getting Unstuck in Midlife Insights from Women in the Middle. And this is a special episode too, because these three amazing women are either currently in the Women in the Middle Academy or are alumni. I have had the pleasure of being their midlife coach for varying amounts of time, and they all had something huge in common. They were stuck. So you know that is kind of normal when you're in midlife. It is very common to go through this experience of not being clear about what you want going forward, or being in a funk, or being off. And that is what was going on with all of them. So it's always so interesting and fascinating, and just makes you feel better to know that this experience that you are having or had is not unique. It really isn't. Of course, there are parts of it that are unique to you, but overall, if you're stuck in the muck, there are many of us that are there with you or have been there before. So just quick before we dive in, I know that in midlife, it is easy to get stuck, like I just said, stuck and confused about your priorities and what the heck you really want to do with your valuable time on the planet. It is no small thing, and like I was saying, you are not alone when it comes to getting clear about what you want, what your passion is, what you want to make sure that you don't have regrets about. So I came up with something new, something very helpful, and it's called the Get Unstuck Midlife Clarity Fast and Easy Masterclass. So here's the thing. Life is too short to waste time feeling stuck in midlife, and if you don't do something about spinning your wheels in confusion, nobody will. So now you can do this. You can take this fun online midlife masterclass and get clear about what you want in your next chapter without spin, confusion, and overwhelm. Get this, in less than an hour. Yes. Then you can get on to the good stuff. More happiness and fulfillment. In the final analysis, that's what we're talking about. So you can grab this masterclass and get unstuck about your priorities fast and easy on your own time in the comfort of your own home, and without even being live on screen. And sometimes that's a relief, right? If you want to sit there in your pajamas, you can. You've got nothing to lose and clarity to gain, my friend. So head over to www.midliferoadmap.com and download Get Unstuck Midlife Clarity Fast and Easy and get started. Now let's dive in. So as I was saying, here is the thing. Being stuck isn't the same for everyone. I hear it typically described as this. Well, I don't know what I want, and I don't know how to get there, and it's really weird. Or maybe like this. Well, I feel kind of off, or I feel blah, or I just feel stagnant these days. When it happened to me, I just no longer felt content. I felt off, and when I finally could put a word to it, a feeling, it was not feeling content, which was very strange for me. I was content for a very long time in that job that I had for, almost 20 years. So feeling stuck is the wake-up call for growth, midlife transition, or transformation. You know something has to change and you want to grow forward, but there's a but. A big but. Something's in the way and you're not sure how to get there. You probably don't even know what's in the way. I thought it would be awesome to hear three women talk about how they were stuck and how they got unstuck, and to have them together in like a panel so they could really, it just really facilitates a conversation. So being unstuck doesn't mean you'll never have to tweak an idea, a goal, or a plan, but it does mean that you learned a lot about what was going on with you that kept you from the clarity that you wanted about what you wanted at this point in your life, about what you wanted in your next chapter, next season, next decade, however you're thinking about it. So in this case, my guests were members of the Women in the Middle Academy. They learned a lot that helped them make a big shift. Now they understand what stuckness, and I'm using air quotes, stuckness was all about for them. And then they applied what they learned to move themselves forward. And they'll talk about this too. I think you can tell from the way I'm talking about this phase of life, I like to call busting through feeling stuck as growing forward. And with this important midlife-related self-development, we're usually talking about how to be more intentional about your life, how to stop just doing and think about what you're doing, how you're doing it, and if it's in alignment with your priorities. Being unstuck and excited about moving forward with your plans on purpose in a way that feels really good with who you are and who you want to be at this phase of life is gold. It's gold. It's intentional and fun and what you're probably craving. The thing is, you also get to enjoy the byproduct of all of that intention, and that, my friend, is more happiness and fulfillment. You're going to love meeting my guests in this Encore episode, so let's get to the good stuff. Let's meet them. Carolyn Gillespie is from the Kansas City, Missouri area and is an accountant at a local nonprofit. She has 3 children in their 20s and a sometimes empty nest. While her son is away at university, she is caring for his cat. She loves choral singing and is also an avid exerciser and has competed locally in some sprint triathlons. Also, if you're a regular listener, you may recognize Carolyn from episode 189 called How Coaching Can Help You Make a Midlife Career Change, when I interviewed her specifically about how she navigated that big change in her life. Then we have Toni Price. She's from St. Joseph, Missouri, and remains loyal to the Kansas City Chiefs. 27 years ago, she moved to the Hoosier State and resides in Muncie, Indiana, with her rescue dog Buddy, and he is a certified therapy dog. So sweet. She has a son and daughter, 3 beautiful grandchildren, and 2 granddogs who, with their families, live in the Indianapolis area. Toni has been in sales and management with a variety of jobs from chamber work to radio sales and is currently a relationship manager. Toni also serves on the theater board, is active in networking groups, a variety of community activities, and women's organizations. Basically, she loves meeting and learning about people. Then we have Crystal. Crystal Soditis lives in Chicago, Illinois with her school-age children, husband, father, and a 90-pound Bernie Doodle. You know how I love a big dog. She's a pediatrician by training, but now works as a healthcare executive from a local health plan. In 2019, Crystal was certified as a life and weight coach through the Life Coach School, which is where she learned of my work. She became a coach to enhance her leadership style and credits this work for her last 2 promotions. 2 promotions and a job switch in under 2 years. She loves coaching other leaders, especially twice exceptional physicians. Crystal loves to cook, take care of her family, and is an avid fan of cruising. I am so grateful that these amazing women took the time to share their experience of working together on the podcast. But the other thing is, I'm so happy, like seriously giddy, to introduce you to them because they are living proof that when you put yourself first like this, you can totally get unstuck, get super clear about what you want, and love your life again. So without further ado, let's dive in. Please enjoy this interview. Hi, ladies. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Women in the Middle podcast.
Hi, Susie.
Woo!
Hey, Susie.
What a panel is with me today. Today, I invited 3 of the amazing women in the middle who have been in my community for quite some time now. And they have a few things to share, a few insights and aha moments, that sort of thing. So first, we're going to do the introductions, and then we're going to dive right in. So today we have Crystal Soditis, we have Carolyn Gillespie, and we have Toni Price. And everybody here today is in their 50s and 60s, and that really is the age range of the majority of the people in my community. We do have some women in the middle in their 40s. Most of them are pushing 50, and many of them turn 50 while we're working together. And it's just super fun to plan that together and to make it more intentional. And then, of course, to celebrate. So like I said, I was really excited to have you all on the show today because I want you to share some of your insights, your aha moments, and your key takeaways from the coaching and the curriculum that you've been working with and working with me on in the coaching community, which, like I said, now is the Women in the Middle Academy. So I talk about the focus of this work being coaching, community, and connection, emphasis on community and connection. And, together we're learning how to get unstuck, how to get clear about what you want in your next chapter, and finally feel free of what's holding you back. So let's start with some introductions. If you could just say a little bit about yourself, how old you are. We love talking about age here in a very positive, empowering way, and where you are in the world. That would be great. So Tony, let's start with you.
That's easy. I am one of the seniors of the group. My name is Tony Price. I'm turned 68 on Sunday, and I am in Muncie, Indiana.
Muncie, Indiana. There must be a song written about that somewhere.
Actually, there is.
Awesome. Welcome. Carolyn, let's hear from you.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Gillespie, and I am 51. I did turn 50 while I was in the group. Also, I am from Kansas City, Missouri.
The Midwest is representing strong today. Welcome. So glad you're here. Did I get that right? Are you both from the Midwest?
Yeah.
It is technically the Midwest, right?
Indiana is the Midwest, although some of us here in Missouri would dispute that.
And Carolyn, I too am, and we have in common that we're both from Missouri.
And I wonder if my third panel guest is also technically from the Midwest. Crystal, let's hear from you.
Yeah, hi, I am Crystal Sodaitis. I am 52 years old, and I am not from the Midwest. I live in Chicago, but I grew up on the East Coast on Long Island.
There we go. And is Chicago technically considered the Midwest?
Yes.
Yes, Chicago is the Midwest.
You know what? I have to say that's the part of the United States that I have the least familiarity with. I've visited I just don't really understand that part of the world so much, but now I have all these new friends to visit.
There you go. Come on down.
Come on anytime.
I think I might once traveling becomes a little more comfortable again, for sure. All right. Thank you so much. So let's start by talking, and we'll do like a round table sort of thing. But of course, if you feel like you want to add to something that somebody else says, please feel free to do so. So let's go back to when you weren't feeling exactly the way you wanted to feel and you started to notice that something was off. Can you talk a little bit about that? What was missing back then? And then what were you looking for when you were looking to join something? What was that experience like for you? Carolyn, do you want to start?
Sure. I'll start. When I started noticing something was off, I was kind of unhappy in my job, and I was kind of not sure what I wanted to do next, but I knew I needed a change. But I was afraid I was too old. I thought I was almost dead and no one would want to hire me and I didn't even know what I was good at and what I could do. What was the other question, Susie?
Well, I just want to pause there for a second on almost dead. What did you notice yourself thinking when you were feeling like that?
I felt defeated, that I was washed up. I'm done. And that's not a good feeling at all.
No, you weren't happy when we first met. That's for sure. The other thing that struck me, though, about what you said is that you really didn't even know what you were good at. And you'd been employed all those years and you have very specific training, which I know we'll get into. But isn't that interesting? And I do hear that from a lot of women is they just don't really have a good, they don't have clarity about what their skills are, what their transferable skills are, and what they want. Did you find that surprising to yourself? Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of bewildering to be at that point where you're like, I don't know what I'm good at, what can I do? And here I've lived, 50 years and I have no idea what I'm good at. And now it seems ridiculous to even have that thought.
I know. But when you're in it, you're in it.
Yep. for sure.
That's for sure. And then what were you looking for? Were you Googling? Were you listening to the podcast? What was that like for you?
How did I find you? Basically?
What were you looking for?
I was looking, I was actually had listened to Brooke Castillo's podcast, and you came on as a guest, and through that podcast, I went, hey, I want to reach out to Susie. So I checked out your website and then decided to do an exploration call with you. And I just, from there on, I was like, yep, that's what I want to do. This is the help I need. And it was more a matter of how can I make it work for me?
Oh, that's awesome. And thanks for sharing that very descriptive experience you had of really feeling defeated and washed up. And as you said, almost dead. I mean, it's really something when you're in it. I know we're all kind of laughing lovingly. And it's so nice now that you can be compassionate with that, that person that you were. It's still you. And it was very painful. So I'm so glad you're not in that space anymore. Awesome.
Me
all right.
Too.
Oh, thank goodness. And Crystal, tell us a little bit about your experience.
Okay. So, I found out about you, Susie, when I was getting certified as a life coach, through the life coach school. And, you were an instructor. And I just fell in love with your personality and your style. And, you really just sort of, connected with you in a way that, you just connect with somebody that you don't actually know. Like I'm sure many of the podcast listeners have connected with you. And then, you at the mastermind that year that we had for life coaches, you gave away a life coaching session with you as a part of a presentation that you did. And of course I jumped on that opportunity, and had a one-on-one session with you that was so pivotal for me because I didn't even realize what I needed. I didn't quote unquote feel stuck because I had just been promoted. I had just gotten certified. I felt like my life was going in a good direction, but you really pointed out so many of the pitfalls that I didn't even know was there. A lot of what we talked about was my promotion. I didn't love the package that I was offered. And so we reframed it in a way that made me feel really good and much more valued in my current position. And I guess the rest is history, like joined the Finally First Club. And then of course, when Finally First rolled over to Women in the Middle Academy, I was all in.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. And I really do remember that moment. It was in the hallway, the foyer outside. And I was so nervous to speak at that event too. And it was just so great. You were so excited to connect and meet. And you are a lot taller than I am, which is, it's so fun when you meet people, you give people a hug and they're so much taller than you. And probably a foot, right? So good. So good. And the irony is what I was talking about at that event was your story and what you have to bring to your story and how you frame your story. So it's ironic that is something that we did together right off the bat.
Yeah.
So good. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. And Tony, how about you?
Mine's quite a story. When I first discovered you, and like everybody else, I think Brooke brought us all together. I was seeking some type of life coach because my daughter had shared that with me. And I found a lady. I did 4 sessions with her. I think I still have 2. I knew she wasn't right for me because I needed somebody more in my age group that had more experience. So it was the pandemic. We're all, and I think a lot of us were probably in that case, we're all home alone with our stinky thoughts. And we're thinking, that little 2-year-old is running wild in her brain. And I too heard you on one of Brooke's podcasts.
Wow.
And I said, I'm going to check this lady out. She's right up my alley. And I will never forget because I thought, I'm going to get a robot, right? So I do the call with you and it's like, oh my God, it's you. It's you in the flesh. I'm really talking to Susie. So it's been wonderful for me. And I think I was stuck. I mean, girls, I'm the senior of this group. And I feel like, and I've done it for years because I've been in sales, we can never stop growing. And I'm not always doing what I want to do, but I sure am managing my thoughts and the circumstance to get that better result.
That's awesome. Do you remember how you felt, Tony, when you were stuck?
I felt like I was in a real spin, like we all are. I think there are things that I feel a little stuck about still, but I can manage it now. Do you know what I mean? I can get better results. I can control my thoughts. I can adjust my feelings. So I think frustration is the big feeling when you feel stuck. But I'm so unstuck now, like I said, because even if it's not what I want, I know how to manage it.
Yes. And I think that is making me have a little flashback now, too, about how I felt when I was stuck for 5 years. Like I was really, really in that hole. And I just remember being so confused as to why I didn't know how to unstick myself. Like I had never been so lost with what to do, which was very strange to me because I pride myself in being a problem solver and a doer. And I was just so confused, and that it was very frustrating to feel that way and not really have the tools or the path to move forward with some level of confidence. It was a very weird time for me too. So yeah, so it's not pleasant to be stuck. And when you're really in it, it's so hard to imagine that you can unstick yourself. It's really bizarre. All right. So I want to really kind of understand what the first or one of the early big insights for you was. So really think about when you had that aha moment, or when something started to fall into place, or you had an epiphany or some clarity that you didn't have before. And where did that come from? Was it the coaching? Was it the curriculum, which is delivered in there's a video component. I prepare these PowerPoint presentations that you do like a do-it-yourself, and then there's worksheets that go with it. And then there's also a podcast workbook. So I select 2 episodes that support the curriculum that is dripped, and make workbook out of it. So there's lots of opportunity to reinforce the material. And then there's also coaching opportunity. And then another piece that often happens, and it's a bit surprising for many, but it's how much you can learn from watching others be coached. Because we really are in a like-minded, similar community, because midlife is what brings us together. We're at an age and stage of life that is different, and we are wanting to grow. And so it's unbelievable how similar our problems are, even though they're different. So when there's coaching, it's very easy to learn from other people. So I'm just wondering if you could, I can't wait to hear what you have to say, but just reflect a little bit on some of those early ahas and where they came from. So Tony, do you want to start?
Understanding that when I looked at things as a circumstance, when I go, this is a circumstance, this is an object that cannot be changed, cannot be moved, and that has been my go-to every single time. I just go right to it. Or I work it backwards and I look at the results and I go, well, wait a minute, there's something I'm doing here that I need to change to get a better result. And I've got to say the group coaching, because I'll listen to the group coaching and I'll go, well, I never thought about it that way. But one of the things about the group that I've got to say, because I see two other lovely ladies on here that I just admire so, I feel like such a sense of community with women in the middle. And I can message these girls. We have each other's backs. We think about each other. And it's a true community of like-minded women that are working hard under your direction and your leadership and giving us the tools. So that's my thoughts on the Academy.
Oh, Tony, thank you so much for sharing that. It's like a jewel, right? It's a beautiful jewel, and the vibe in it is not competitive. It's not backstabby. It's not it's so safe and so supportive. And there is a genuine affection that we have for each other. Now, not everybody participates to the same level. And, that's a beautiful thing too, because if you don't feel as comfortable putting yourself out there, you can read quietly and participate in writing. If you are more comfortable with getting coached, then you can get coached. But there's also coaching possibility in our Slack group, which is like online, in lockdown. So there are lots of ways, but what I've really wanted to do with the Academy is to include more social opportunities. So once a month, we have a strictly social Zoom call because we are participating from all over. And there's going to be a wide variety of activities that we do on the Zoom call. And then also there's this mindful doodling workshop that happens every other month. And sometimes, we're very quiet and focused, but sometimes it's just another way to access personality and connection. And then, of course, there's the coaching opportunities. So I'm really, I love that you mentioned the community, and it was everything I hoped for, because I've been in many communities myself, and you don't get the same vibe from all of them. And I do get private messages where people are concerned about the community being cliquey or competitive. And it's not like that at all. And it never has been. So I'm always thinking that maybe a lot of women that do find the Academy have found me through podcasts, through my podcast, or like you said, through the Life Coach School podcast, which is an amazing support. And I think, I think if you didn't connect with my personality, which is a little silly, lots of laughing, but upbeat, but still dealing gently and compassionately with very serious issues, I don't know that you would continue to be a listener. Like, you do have to connect with me, and then the group is an extension of that. And then the other thing you mentioned, Tony, which is so important, differentiating what is factual in your life versus your interpretation of those facts is such a foundational piece of the thoughtfulness, the mindfulness, the thought work, the watching your thoughts skill that we learn, even though it seems so basic. And when you're listening right now, you're listening to it, you're like, oh, come on, that's not even that complex, separating a fact from a thought about a fact. But when it's your own shenanigans and drama, it's very complicated. It all feels like facts. But that is such an empowering part of the work that we do, increasing your own skill set to make that differentiation, because that differentiation is so empowering to know. And right away, you just stop spinning as much on things you can't change, and you're able to see more clearly how you're thinking about those things. And then even if you don't fully believe it yet, but that that's where you have power, that you can be curious about the way you're interpreting, and you can work on your mindset. And those are the exact skills we work on. So that really sets you free. And I'm so glad that you've gotten so much out of that, Tony. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Crystal, let's hear from you. What is one of your ahas or insights or things that really affected you doing this work?
So one of the biggest ahas for me relates back to one of the ways that you push me the most outside of my comfort zone, which is the the assessment of where you are in your relationships, in your career, and in your self-care. Is it the bold, brave, and I can't remember the third B?
Becoming bold and brave, becoming the woman you want to be. Yeah.
Yeah. That, you recommend that people bring out their colored pencils and color in, where you are, whether it's, red, yellow, or green. And that assessment really showed me that I do have work to do in my relationships, and I didn't even realize it. Like it was I was like, wow, like, yeah, I guess I do really, I'm not where I want to be in terms of relationships with other people, both inside and outside of my family. So that was a huge aha. And then, all of the sort of creative, I see myself very staunchly as a non-creative, and you challenged me on that at every turn. And I've benefited.
Oh, wow. That's great. So Crystal, what you're talking about is what I call the stoplight assessment. And it is fun to take out the colored pencils. Anytime we have a chance to pull those pencils out, super fun, or crayons or markers. But yeah, what you're talking about is that framework that I use that kind of drives the curriculum. And it's becoming bold and brave is how I've articulated it in that assessment. So becoming the woman you want to be, which is self-care and everything related to self-care, and relationships, becoming more intentional about relationships and the way you make a formal contribution in the world, career or volunteerism, but the way that when you put on your working girl hat, the way you feel professional. And so what you're talking about is that intentional relationship piece, which I have divided into more narrow aspects. And that is definitely something that so many women our age have not been exceptionally intentional about for a variety of reasons. But it comes up a lot in midlife when you think about your partner, your kids, your parents, your siblings, and then also your friends and the way you connect in the community, all those kinds of things. But the question is, how can you become more intentional about your relationships? Many of us don't even think about it because we haven't identified that it's not where we want it to be. We haven't even thought about it that way. So that's amazing that it made such an impact. And using the pencils, when you see a big giant chunk of red, that's like, ooh, I guess I stopped working on that area. And then you have a choice as to how much you want to proceed. So that is part of the curriculum, and it is it's very well received. I get a lot of feedback on that. It's very illuminating. I think also because the coloring, just like the mindful doodling work, it takes you out of your head, and it's another way to access insight. Like you're more relaxed when you're working on with that side of your brain and with the pencils and pens, and then you can look at something and get some insight too. So that's awesome. Thank you. I love increasing the creativity on people who don't think they're creative at all. There's so many ways to be creative. Okay, Carolyn, let's hear from you. How, what is one of the early insights that you had?
That's a good question because there's so many. But I think one of the things was I knew I needed to identify my emotions. I think that, that to me, the feelings were the first thing that I noticed. And then I'm like, why am I feeling this way? So I feel like I kind of start in the middle of the thought model a lot of times. And then I have to work and figure out what my thought is that's causing this feeling, based on my reaction to whatever my circumstance is. And one of the first things that I noticed was fear, that I felt a lot of fear about the future and about what I was going to do with my life and what I wanted to be when I grew up. I use that phrase a lot. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. and here I am 50 years old, not knowing what I want to be. So there was a lot of fear. And through working with you and with the group, I kind of started to realize that I had a lot of fear about not being good, about starting something new and not being an expert at it already. And when you think about it, okay, that makes no sense. But I really, there's so many things that I have done my whole life that I'm pretty good at. And when I pick up something new, I tend to think I should be at expert level or good, pretty good level. And I'm not. Why would I be? And then to recognize that it's okay. That's the thing. It's okay to not be good at something that you're just starting. And to give yourself grace to accept that is hard. It is something through working with you, I ended up getting a new job in an area that I hadn't had full-time employment in. And it was just wonderful and amazing. And I'm glad, but I've been in this job for a little over a year, and my learning curve is vertical. It's not a curve. It's just straight up. And it's been really good, but there are times I'm still fighting that demon of why am I not good, or why am I not as good as I want to be, or why am I not in that place? And the thought work helps me catch it. I think that's it. You catch yourself doing these things. So you might spin still, just not as long, and you catch yourself. And to me, that's really important, that, it's not like, it's all unicorns and rainbows right now. It's not always that, but you know how to deal with it, and and sometimes it's like, you're right where you need to be. And I think that's was a very much an aha moment. It's like, it's okay that you're not an expert. That's okay. You're right where you need to be. You're in the process.
Wow, that is so good. I'm so glad you mentioned fear. So many of us feel fear, and that was the emotion that also surprised me when I was in my stuckness. It never occurred to me that I was fearful. I didn't think of myself as a fearful person. I actually thought of myself as courageous and brave. So to be faced with that feeling that I was having trouble recognizing, I was floored, but I was scared to death. And also the fear was related to a thought I had about aging out as well. And you talked about that a little bit at the beginning, but I felt like all of my years in my career, and I really did like my career, but I always thought that being older and wiser and having seniority and earning benefits and getting the perks of being a long-term employee, I always thought that was good, that was gold star material, right? And then I started to come face to face with this idea that it wasn't going to serve me the way perhaps if I would have changed jobs and not been in the same job for 19 years. And that if I would have pushed myself to take secondments and to have more experiences, and that maybe that's what I should have been doing. And it all came, I felt like it was like to a screeching halt in my brain where I went, wow, I made big mistakes. I've been kidding myself. I really thought I was kidding myself. So I was extremely fearful too. And then the other thought that you shared about being a beginner, exactly. Being a beginner when you're used to being at the top of your field, of your skill set, of your profession, and knowing that you are the one who's going to be getting feedback, and you are the one who's going to have a learning curve or a steep climb, whatever it is. I mean, I even felt that when I went to tap dancing after 40 years. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be the old lady in the group. And I recognized it once in a tennis group. I'm like, oh my God, I'm the oldest one here in this group. How young are these ladies? Oh my God, I think they're in their 20s. So it's just having more age awareness and understanding that, yeah, you might be one of the older women in the group, but what are you making that mean? And so what if you're a beginner and you're learning? You have so much to bring to the table. A lot of the new research that's been coming out in the last few years is focusing on older workers and what they bring emotionally and socially to the table, and how it's very different and very, very needed in workplaces. And so I love, seeing that, because as an older worker, it is easy for a lot of us to feel less than. So, I totally get the fear, and I hear that from so many women when they're, knowing that they need to change, but feeling very resistant or scared and not really understanding what the problem is. I mean, honestly, the other thing is the last time I applied for a job was out of the newspaper. LinkedIn did not exist. There was nothing online, no way to apply. I mean, in that year that I got my last job, I got a mouse at my first. I had a computer, I had an office, and I had a mouse. The job before that, I had a shared computer with no mouse. So this was in 1994 that I'm referencing, but yeah, like things really changed. So there's just so many things that go into thinking about changing your career. And it was a pleasure and an honor, actually, Carolyn, watching you navigate that and then come out the other end with exactly what you wanted, even though it was scary, even though it was a pandemic, even though you really challenged yourself and learned to embrace that original training that you disconnected from so much. So interesting.
It was nice to feel proud of myself and confident in myself, where I hadn't felt that in a while.
Wow. You're a poster child for this work. You all are, actually. Like, really, what we're talking about, to somebody who's stuck, it might feel like just unattainable because you're also happy and you're thriving. And no, it's not perfect. Of course it's not perfect. We're all still working on other things, but there has been movement and there has been success and there has been more excitement. Like, there's more excitement and positivity when you really start to embrace what's actually possible, and you call yourself out on tolerating what's not bringing you joy. That's the thing. Like, for years, we tolerate so much. Does anybody relate to that idea of just tolerating and putting up with? Tony, do you relate to that?
Of course I can. I mean, I've been terrible at tolerating and putting up with all my life. It's kind of like my MO. I think probably all of us have. I think the nice thing about it is that instead of being frustrated and angry and blaming, now I have that tool to go, and I've said this and I'm repeating it, is I'm not going to change that. That can't be changed, but I can change the way I think and act about it. So this is a tool. I say this was my pandemic gift, and I'm probably going to be 75 and showing up with all of the stuck
Awesome.
with, because I'm going to be the woman in the middle that lives to be 140, right? So, yeah, I think we all have.
That's amazing. So what would you say the after looks like? So we talked a lot about the before, and just briefly, if you could, just a sentence or two or a feeling or two of what it's like to have made progress on unsticking yourself. What does that look or feel like to you? Crystal, do you want to start?
Yeah. It feels like in many ways really freeing. And it feels like acceptance. It's a lot of what, Tony and Carolyn already said, is that it's not like all of a sudden life is perfect, because life will never be perfect. But when you do hit those bumps in the road, they don't derail you to the same extent as they used to. You've got tools in your toolbox. Tony used the word a tool. That's what it is. Like, thought work is just a tool. It's a fantastic tool that you can use to help get yourself out of the spin. And Tony also talked about the community. There's so much support within the community. And then there's also Slack, where if you're in a spin, you can always post something on Slack, and you get great coaching from you, Susie, but then you also get support from the other women.
So good. I like to call it a glorious spin. Like, let's really talk about that spin we're in. It's glorious. Thank you for sharing. So freeing, acceptance, and just that confidence that you're not going to be derailed because you know what to do. Even if you don't have the whole thing solved, you know what to, at least the next step to take. That's awesome. Carolyn, how would you describe it? The after.
Well, the after is similar to what Crystal said. As far as, life isn't perfect, but life is intentional for me now. And if I'm doing things that I'm not happy with, like what Tony said about maybe, doing some things that, you don't really want to do, but you still have to do. I mean, you can't get out of doing the dishes and cleaning the bathroom. But there, you're able to focus on maybe why you're doing something. Susie, you often say, if you like your reasons for feeling a certain way, then that's important. That's intentional. You understand that, yes, this means something to me. So if I'm unhappy about social injustice in the world or something like that, if I like my reason, if, it's justifiable in some sort of way to me, then that's important. Those are emotions that are important. But I do also like that when you don't like your reasons, you catch yourself and you can say, okay, how can I reframe what's going on here to be in a way that I do like how I'm feeling about it.
So good. Thank you for that. And Tony, what's your after look like?
I think I used to do things like, how we would run to somebody and go, do you know what so-and-so did? Or what do you think about this? Totally. And we would blame and complain. Well, I don't blame and complain anymore. And I think when I say, and I said it in our group, I said, I'm so unstuck. And I am so unstuck because I just look at that immovable, that object that cannot be moved. And I can't do anything about it. And I don't need to go run and flap my jaws about it. I can just sit down and assess the situation. And like these ladies have said, we can do things intentionally and we have that control. So that's the difference.
Yeah, and huge difference, right? And I would say for me, having done this work before I met y'all and with y'all, I feel right now such a responsibility to amplify my life. And that word amplification, I really take seriously. So I like to amplify joy, to amplify happiness, to kind of sniff out an opportunity and pump it up. And I'm much more aware of doing that now, not just waiting, not just receiving or responding, but to take action and amplify. And I've done that. I've done it and I want to do more of it. And it's much more top of mind now. And that's intentional. Okay. So closing thought, very brief. If you could tell if your future self had an opportunity to tell you something now that you're on the other side of stuckness, but you know there's more possibility in your life. One sentence, what would that future self of yours say to you now at this age and stage? Tony, what would she say?
My future self would say, why did you not do this sooner?
Exactly.
I mean, come on, girl. Why? I wish you would have been a calmer, less knee-jerk person sooner.
So good. Okay.
So if you're not even 50, do it.
No, exactly. Crystal, what would she say to you?
My future self would say, you are living your best life and you have Susie to thank for it.
Oh my gosh, Crystal, thank you. And I can't even tell you all how grateful I am for your participation and commitment. That's for sure. You're a doll. Okay, Carolyn, what would she say to you?
Well, she would say, you're not almost dead and you still have a lot of living to do and a lot of learning to do. So get in gear, get to work with Susie and get into the women in the middle, because that's where you need to be. And it's such a supportive community. And if you're, for me, I've always been looking for a tribe, and I think I found it. I know I did.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Ladies, thank you so much for spending this time with me on the podcast. Your growth and commitment to yourself is unbelievable. I couldn't be more happy for you, and I couldn't be more proud to be just a little part to have helped you grow this way. So thank you so much. I can't wait to see what else that you do.
Thanks, Susie.
Talk to you soon. Okay, that's it for this episode. So great to hear from them, wasn't it? Like I said before, I am so grateful that Crystal, Carolyn, and Tony came on to share their powerful experiences and insights, because it helps make it so obvious that you're not alone and that you can do this. When you're stuck, like you may be right now, it can feel so overwhelming and confusing. You may be more confused than ever before about what to do, where to go, how to move forward, that kind of stuff. And doing it alone when you feel so alone, it doesn't work for everyone. You could be part of a true community that can really help and support you on your path forward. And what that means is that your next chapter can not only be more clear and more fun, but it can also be more supportive and more a phase where you have more true connection. And that's something that can be hard to find in midlife. So please, if you are spinning and feeling stuck, take a baby step and book your free no obligation momentum call with me. And we'll talk about what it could mean for you and regret-proofing your life. What could the Academy mean for you and the way that you grow forward? You're invited to consider joining the Academy. It's a no-obligation call, but the Academy really will help you create what it is that you want in your life on purpose. So, as you know, my focus as a midlife coach is to help you waste less time spinning and feeling stuck. This is what regret-proofing your life is all about. That's why I use that phrase, regret-proofing, all the time. Being the queen of your brain domain, it really is the best way to be. If you want to get unstuck and more clear about your next chapter, please check out the Women in the Middle Academy. So just go to www.womeninthemiddleacademy.com. And finally, for show notes and links, head over to susierosenstein.com and click the podcast tab and look for episode 364. You'll also see links there for the new show, Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs. Thanks so much for listening. It's time for you to put yourself first, one thought at a time. I'm Susie Rosenstein, and I'll talk to you next week.